How has Vladimir Putin managed to deceive millions of Russians for so many years and now try to convince them that the war in Ukraine is justified?
Против нас весь западный мир.
Мы уже воюем с НАТО.
Началась война с НАТО на территории Украины.
Должен пылать Берлин, Париж, Мадрид.
Hi, my name is Ekaterina Kotrikadze. Today I'm going to try to explain to you exactly how Russian propaganda works. In order to be able to understand what's happening today, let's take a look back to the early 2000s. Vladimir Putin becomes the head of the Kremlin as he gets elected to his first presidential term. The state immediately begins to take control of all major media outlets, primarily television channels, which at the time were owned mostly by various oligarchs. The most telling example was that of NTV, the channel friendliest to opposition viewpoints at the time. In 2001, under the guise of a dispute between its owners, it was nationalized. Over the next few years, the state eventually takes over either directly or indirectly all the major television channels in the country. Why the focus on television? It remains the main source of information for most Russians, 64% according to a poll conducted last fall, particularly among the elderly. Television is least popular among young people aged from 18 to 24. Only 37% of this group named TV as their main source of news. But this figure grows to an astronomical 84% for those 55 and over. The state, in turn, allocates billions of rubles within its budget for television content. Today, the Russian state-run media exists under strict censorship. It is well known that its content is guided by so-called methodological manuals, documents regularly prepared by the presidential administration of Russia and sent to the editorial boards of state and pro-Kremlin media outlets. They explain how to cover any type of news item. Meet Alexei Gromov, first deputy chief of staff of the presidential administration. He's the guy who oversees media work in Russia. For instance, he holds weekly meetings with managers of big media outlets. Let me give you a few examples of censorship on television from the past. The most obvious one is that there have been blacklists for television. There are lists with names and surnames of activists and politicians who cannot be allowed onto broadcasts. Alexei Navalny, for example, was on such a blacklist.
Если вы его позовете, он придет охотно, потому что это Первый канал. Конечно. А ко мне он не идет.
Как вы думаете, мне позволят?
Often, the federal TV channels have simply preferred to remain silent about events that are, let's say, inconvenient for the Russian authorities. These are the mass protests in Moscow in 2011. They began on December 4th, sparked by mass falsification during the parliamentary elections of that year. They decided to discuss it on TV, but an entire week later.
На санкционированный столичными властями многотысячный митинг собрались сторонники разных политических сил. Репортаж Алексея Петрова.
При входе на Болотную площадь металлоискатели, плотный контроль, чтобы никаких ЧП и провокаций.
Propaganda is not always made up of lies or fake news. Often it is silent or manipulative of events. Propaganda is often based on partial truth. Жанна Agalakova explained how it works. She is a former journalist for Channel 1. After the big war began, Agalakova quit her job.
Ограничения были темой, конечно. То есть в какой-то период хорошие новости из Соединенных Штатов не приветствовались.
Or Marina Ovsyannikova, the editor of Channel 1, she also quit during the war. She even managed to run out with a placard displayed on live TV.
К сожалению, последние годы я работала на Первом канале, занимаясь кремлевской пропагандой. И мне сейчас очень стыдно за это. Стыдно за то, что позволяла говорить ложь с экрана телевизора. Стыдно за то, что позволяла зомбировать русских людей.
As for the issue of fake news, perhaps one of the most famous examples in the history of Russian television concerns Ukraine, and it occurred long before the full-scale invasion even began. In July 2014, Channel 1 aired a segment about how Ukrainian security forces crucified a 3-year-old child in eastern Ukraine right in front of his mother's eyes.
Это называется показательная казнь. Взяли ребенка 3 лет, мальчика маленького, в трусиках, футболке, как Иисуса, на доску объявления прибили. Один прибивал, 2 держали.
No evidence of this story actually happening was found by any independent journalist at the time. For many years, propaganda on Russian television has offered viewers a central idea, an inevitable confrontation with the West.
Давайте будем объективны. Специальная военная операция против Украины закончилась давно. То есть весь военно-промышленный потенциал Украины уничтожен уже ощутимо давно.
Да мы воюем с Западом.
Мы сейчас воюем с Западом, мы воюем с натовским оружием, мы воюем против натовского оружия, мы воюем против натовского ВПК.
Today's propagandists are constantly trying to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The NATO bloc is constantly expanding, threatening Russia, they say on TV. That's why President Putin was supposedly forced to launch a preemptive strike.
Им нужен плацдарм просто для того, чтобы там находилась натовская какие-то там базы, позиции для того, чтобы продолжать вот эту свою экспансию.
On television, they rebuke Western values, often to a comical extent.
А вот здесь в переводе на русский там о чем он говорит? Вот, ребят, у меня почему все не получается? Почему у меня цены растут? Почему у меня инфляция? Почему у меня экономика? Я окружен сплошными дарасами, понимаете? Я окружен ими, поэтому у меня ничего не получается.
Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, Russia has effectively imposed military censorship. The authorities have tried to restrict the information available in any way they can. By the end of the summer, the Russian Prosecutor General's office reported that 138,000 websites allegedly spreading inaccurate information about the so-called special military operation had been blocked in the country. This included blocking the websites of all major independent media outlets, including the TV Rain channel. Journalists and editorial boards went abroad to continue their work, but the state continues to file cases against them, declaring them to be foreign agents and undesirables.